Con ustedes, Barry MOWSZOWSKI, de Berlin School of Creative Leadership, quien nos presenta The Future of Doing, Liderazgo Creativo.
Hola amigos y amigos, nuestro primer día de CRECHI, su segunda versión, año 2020, un año diferente. Estamos haciendo esta versión en plena pandemia, ¿cierto? El año pasado lo hicimos de forma presencial y con speakers del mismo nivel. Este año estamos repitiendo y les queremos transmitir mucha energía. Sé que es una jornada larga, es día martes, después de mucho trabajo. Así que esperamos que la presentación que viene a continuación realmente sea una inspiración. Los queremos sacudir en sus lugares de trabajo, en su casa, oficina, en el parque, donde estén. Hoy día tenemos un invitado especial. Se trata de Barry MOWSZOWSKI. Él es el Independent Strategy Director de la Berlin School of Creative Leadership, donde también tuve el privilegio de estudiar. Les quiero contar algunos datos importantes de nuestro querido Barry. Él nació en Sudáfrica, vivió en Australia, también ha trabajado en Nueva York y en varios mercados de Asia-Pacífico. Es un tipo muy inquieto. Yo me consideraba inquieto, pero en realidad Barry es mucho más inquieto que yo. Así que prepárense para la charla. Barry es un consultor independiente de estrategia que se especializa en la transformación de negocios, innovación y comunicaciones estratégicas. Él cuenta con más de 2 décadas, ¿cierto?, de experiencia en cargos de estrategia en las mejores agencias de hub tecnológicos como San Francisco, Sydney y New York, dentro de las que también destaca haber trabajado de la mano, codo a codo, con el gran David Droga en Publicis New York y Droga 5, donde construyó un excelente portfolio de clientes en el mercado Asia-Pacífico. Si hay un tipo que se maneja en el mercado Asia-Pacífico, ese es Barry MOWSZOWSKI. Además, en asociación, en asociatividad con The Future Laboratory y como Head of Strategy en Contagious, la famosa medio de comunicación británico, ¿cierto?, que tiene el más alto estándar de creatividad, Barry también se aventuró en el futuro del trabajo y la cuarta revolución industrial, asumiendo el papel de director de marketing de Fund, una plataforma de análisis predictivo con sede en Sydney que impulsa la economía y el valor social de las tecnologías emergentes. Barry, al igual que yo, es un orgulloso graduado del MBA de la Berlin School y describe su carrera como lo siguiente. Básicamente, se basa en la colaboración con personas inteligentes y tenaces para crear experiencias de marca que generen ganancias e idealmente un propósito social. Dejo, sin más preámbulo, dejo con ustedes al queridísimo Barry MOWSZOWSKI y su charla de liderazgo creativo titulada The Future of Doing. Please, welcome to the stage. Give a warm welcome to our friend. Please, Barry, the stage, the presentation is all yours. Prepare for the question right after your presentation.
Pancho, thank you very much. I had no idea what you just said. Didn't understand a word, but it sounded very passionate. So at my funeral...
I just said good things, friend. Don't worry.
At my funeral, please can you give that speech in Spanish? It sounded very passionate. So this is the worst time to give a presentation in a conference is the first thing in the morning or the end of the day. So, and I also don't speak Spanish. So with those things combined, please do me a favor, wherever you're listening to this, just take a stretch, just give me your brain for the next 30 minutes. And I would really appreciate it because even though it is the end of the day, I just want to get the best out of you because I can't see you as well. So this is a conversation about creative leadership and about commercial creativity because I'm conscious that on the line, there are people who are photographers, there are clients, there are agency people, there's a whole mix of people. So creative leadership isn't just about advertising. So this presentation is supposed to cater to everyone's needs. And hopefully, strategically, there's a thread which connects all of you in this presentation. So the Berlin School of Creative Leadership, as Pancho said, both Pancho and I are graduates of the school. This is an executive MBA program that has a global reach. So it's in North America, Asia, and Europe. And look into it further if you want executive level education in creative leadership, please. But one of the things I wanted to share with you was, just to kick this off, was some creative context as to what creative leadership means. Because creative leadership has become a trending buzzword, just like agile as describing a very stressful, quick way of working. And a lot of people seem to lack an interpretation or an understanding of just what creative leadership means in practice. So I just want to play something very briefly for you.
I'm not hearing the audio. Are you hearing, guys?
I think there were some audio issues. Don't worry, I will send a link to Pancho and Magdalena for the presentation. You guys okay if I just carry on? Is that all right?
Magdalena, you wanna play back again to the video and maybe see if we can figure out the audio issue with.
Don't worry. In the interest of time and energy, I'll just keep moving. But essentially what the Edge was talking about from U2 was he was talking about the creative process and how the band arrives at new music and how they create new music. And the role of the producer, Brian Eno, was all about finding new ways to derive inspiration from these musicians. Now, irrespective of if you like U2, they are the best band in the world, but even if you don't, what's interesting is that having been in the business for over 40 years, they're constantly trying to reinvent. And what that clip was going into was the different techniques that the producer uses to get the best out of these musicians, to leave room for spontaneity and for things to change and pivot. So any of you who have practiced creative leadership, you know that intuitively you need those skills. You need to be the Pancho Gonzalez's of the creative industry to mobilize people and have a point of view that allow them space to be at their best. Now, you all know this familiar image because this is the disgusting visualization of COVID. And COVID almost created a screaming full stop to the creative momentum in all of our lives. So what's happening in Santiago and Sydney and New York, for example, the democratization of COVID in impacting on our lives has been very dramatic. What you're not going to hear in this presentation are words like the new normal, unprecedented. I'm sure like you are bored shitless of hearing those words because it's become so numbing as to how disruptive COVID has been. Rather, what I wanted to do is give a bit of a strategic view around what is happening in the commercial creativity landscape, because as you all know, politics, culture, and economics, they're all interlinked, which have a direct correlation on creative industries like ours. So something I found which is really interesting, a global anxiety index, which this is as recent as October, you can see that Chile, I would imagine based on my conversations with the team, that percentage score of 4% is actually much higher in reality. But it's what's happening in your country right now with the political and social unrest, from what I understand, the people wanting to establish a new constitution, and that sense of creating a new operating system for society, that is reflective on the global anxiety index. Overlay that on top of it because of COVID, how disruptive that's been as well. But it does sound like what's happening in Chile has been this perfect storm where those things are colliding together as well. So Chile, in the context of India, Ireland, and South Africa, disproportionate to other countries, is definitely going through a lot of tumultuous change right now. When you look at the global perspective around what people are worried about, 28% losing my job, going to stores, engaging in in-person service, taking a flight. These are just some statistics to show that globally, everyone is in the same circumstance, and it's just as uncomfortable for everyone. Obviously, there's countries like New Zealand and Australia, which has controlled the pandemic better than others compared to the US, which is going in the opposite direction. But everyone's trying to work out strategically, how do we manage this? Governments are trying to work with businesses to stimulate a sense of recovery, and creative industries have been hit really hard, especially some of the artists who are participating today, because our trade is all about tactile, building relationships with people, being in community squares, selling your artwork. So it's challenged people to rethink how we work. And for those of you who feel that this is appropriately so, the shittest time you can remember, yes, it's true. A lot of indicators are pointing downwards, growth statistics, etc. But you can tell by my personality and why I'm friends with people like Pancho, there's a supreme optimist aspect to my personality, which is also very Australian. So in my terrible Spanish, insatisfacción positiva, which probably sounds horrific in Spanish, that is the strategy for as much for this presentation as I think for creative leadership in Chile. And the psychology and the decision-making and the spirit with which the collective attitude on how you're going to solve your challenges as an industry and as a community, very complex challenges which are very different to those in other countries, like Australia, for example, or New York. but very meaningful ones because you're recalibrating what your society looks like as well. And there's a strong role for creative leadership to play in doing that. Am I talking too fast, Pancho? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay. Sorry, I'm conscious of my English. So one thing I found, which is really interesting, and if you haven't seen this, you must, not right now when I'm talking to you, but after this presentation, Google the Future of Jobs report by the World Economic Forum. This was released in October. And strategically what this does is it looks at the future of jobs and the future of work as we discussed that as a horizon view, which sounded very far away. But what COVID's done is now it's accelerated that change, and the digitization of services and how we work and the impact on the workforce has been really profound. So what you can see here are, these are the 6 or 7 big macro strategic issues that the World Economic Forum identified. But what's impacting us is the workforce impact. And I wanted to pull out of this report some very specific, actionable insights on how it's going to impact commercial creativity and creative leadership as well. And when you think about, how businesses has reacted to COVID, it's accelerated the digitization of work. We know that. We're doing this conference. I'm sitting in my apartment in Sydney while all of you are at home in Chile or across South America. And video conferencing has become the new normal. You've had to overcompensate. I had to be more theatrical and more engaging to retain your attention because I can't see you. So what was weird 6 months ago has now become just our normal way of working. And when we think about automation of tasks and working remotely, we know that that will become sustained going forward. The challenge for leadership is how in 2021, if you're a Pancho managing a team of people, some of them feel safe going into the office, some of them want to continue working from home, how do you start managing that hybrid way of working? That's where creative leadership comes into this, because you need the emotional intelligence to understand how to balance people's needs with marrying with the commercial objectives and the outcomes. And when we think about the technologies, it's no surprise, because with the acceleration in digitalization, cloud computing, big analytics, Internet of Things, those things which were trendy buzzwords in the last 5 or 7 years have now become incredibly important. So businesses who couldn't operate at retail now have to double down on digital and CRM and loyalty with the customer. And any businesses that neglected investment in those spaces are going through the pain right now, where they're not servicing the customer need. When we look at, and for all of us on this call should pay attention to this slide, because these are the projected key 5 to 10 areas of growth in the next 5 to 7 years, which will be heavily required in the marketplace. From a marketing point of view, growth hacking, growth managing, it's all about stimulating growth. And those skill sets can't come traditionally from a computer algorithm right now. It's all relationship based. When we look at product development, it's about product owners, about leading squads of people. From a sales point of view, customer success specialists, sales development, it's all about harnessing people's energy and leading them to outcomes. That is a creative leadership skill set that if you don't have it now, we increasingly will need to require them, because business is going from a hierarchical top-down model to a very flat system. Squads of people coming in and solving the problem. The freelance workforce keeps on growing. So you need these skill sets, and these are definitely indicative roles and responsibilities you should think about for your own career, because not only the World Economic Forum is projecting this, but the marketplace is narrowing the field of relevance. So these are very interesting learnings for you guys. We're going to share this presentation, so don't worry about writing anything down. But if we step back and think about commercial creativity, it has the power to transform organization, brands, and culture. It also has the power to transform governments, because governments are the most lazy, bureaucratic, full of shit institutions in the world in some countries, because they've been allowed to be. And governments all across the world, I'm sure in Chile, they say the same thing. We reduce red tape, which is bureaucracy. We are being more efficient with your taxpayer money, and we're delivering for you, which in many cases is bullshit, because they're either not doing 1, 2, or 3 of those things. Excuse my language, but hopefully a Chilean audience can tolerate swearing like that. But when we think about commercial creativity, then we think, okay, what are those skills? Well, what underpins those skills? Critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, self-management, working with people. Yes, you could look at this and say, well, those are skill sets that are pre-COVID. Those are skill sets that are normal. Lateral thinking and the ability to lead people and motivate people to different outcomes in the face of turbulence and uncertainty, that is where creative leadership steps in, and it's an inclusive mindset. And we're seeing people like Tim Cook from Apple, leaders who are emotionally aware to see the bigger picture, take a perspective on gay rights and equality, hiring in the workplace, and advocating for rights and values in the marketplace that transcend just generating profit as a business. So these are the skill sets that underpin our industry in the next 5 or 7 years moving forward. And when we think about the top 15 skills as well, it's about resilience. Number 9, I was talking to Pancho, resilience and stress tolerance and flexibility. Resilience is one of those words people love using. The people who understand resilience are the people who've been kicked in the chest and who've fallen on your knees through failure, and failure builds resilience. What Chile is going through right now, where there's this lateral thinking around how do we solve these problems? How do we work together to solve these problems? And the referendum you had on rewriting the constitution and not relying on politicians to dictate the future of Chile, that is a profound turning point. And you can look to countries like Rwanda, who through their turmoil around the genocide have rebuilt that country to the point where they have Umaganda, which is one Saturday, the last Saturday of every month, the whole country, from the president to the youngest people in the country, go out and clean up the streets of the country, because everyone's collective responsibility is one Rwanda and the well-being of the nation. So there's a lot of lateral lessons you can learn from how other categories have approached it, which is where design thinking and creative leadership is a fundamental role to solve the challenges in Chile. When we think about our industry, though, there's been a huge convergence of holistic and innovative brand experiences, which are driven by customer experience and employee experience. And those two things now are connecting more than ever before. And when we think about the lacking in relevance of advertising in recent years, that with the recession, the global economic crisis in 2008 to 10, what you saw was people retreating, saying, I don't want to consume more crap. I don't want to keep buying. I'm more conscious on my consumption. And that shifted attention away from advertising as a way to fuel desire to the customer experience has never been more important than ever. Now we see the employee experience as being just as critical a piece, because people are saying, I've got more choice in the marketplace than I ever have before. Why do I want to work for you? And that's where we're seeing people working for Google and Facebook coming out with points of view where they're complaining about their leadership. Google, we don't want you to go into China. We don't want you to launch a search engine in China, which suppresses free speech. So I'm just highlighting those examples because you can see that this is not an intellectual exercise that a chief marketing officer would put on the slide. All of those factors actually influence the customer experience and the employee experience. And that's where creative leadership has never been more critical. And then you think about the relationship between clients and agencies. And those two things have never been more stressful because there are many reasons which is causing that tension, but still we need each other. Whether you're a photographer, you have a client, don't get hung up if you don't work in an agency to understand the slide. Everyone has a stakeholder that they need to partner with to create value with. And the key sweet spot is that innovation is delivered through organizational culture. And the team of people that you lead, whether it's a bigger business like Pancho or a small startup, the culture within your organization that is defined on a beautiful PowerPoint, and then the unspoken values and rules that people actually feel in that tangible way, how people model behaviors, those are critical to retaining talent. And that is going to be the most stressful thing for you as a creative leader, to retain talent moving forward, because people will never have as much choice as they had before, and people need to work together, and they need to work together faster than they have ever had before as well. So what's happening, and we see this all around the world, industries are being reshaped and converged and created, which is really exciting. So the key strategic ingredients that the Berlin School sees as driving that change: human optimization, helping people get the most out of their productivity, businesses that are customer obsessed, that are monetizing every step in their customer journey, and then a focus on value creation. What business are we in? How do we create value, and how do we capture that value? So categories, products, and services. And you can see a business like Apple now, where they compete in different verticals. Their products, they position them at a premium price, and now they're monetizing software and services, which is 28% of their revenue. That is value creation as an ecosystem. So as managers and leaders, we need to create those value creation ecosystems for our clients and for our own businesses, which is very, very hard to do. So the difference between category competition, which is an old school way of looking at business, versus category creation. Category competition in the old school sense was, oh, we offer a better solution, incremental upgrades. Category creation, which is where businesses like Airbnb are really monetizing and innovating in the whole travel experience space. They're delivering to unmet needs. They're owning the market. They're educating people. They're evangelizing their customers by creating a pipeline of experience that can only be found there. So we're seeing a big shift from leveraging mainstream media to investing in owned assets, which is really a fundamental part of succeeding in business today. So in the last part of this presentation, I want to just call out some of the big elephants in the room topics that are challenging our industry, because I'm conscious of time and our Q&A time. Clients, when I say clients, I'm talking about like traditional clients like McDonald's and Nike and Coca-Cola. They're questioning value. They're questioning value of their agencies and their partners. And that's equating to less loyalty to suppliers and vendors. So a lot of clients have shifted. And for those clients who are dialing into this presentation, you will know what I'm talking about. There was a shift from retainer relationships to project. And when you have promiscuous relationships, by promiscuous, what I mean is non-commitment relationships, almost like dating like we're on a professional Tinder app. When you have that type of a psychology, there's a less invested in that relationship. And that puts a lot of stress on that relationship between the clients and the agency. And at the same time, what I find interesting is it's a bit counterintuitive as well. And Gartner released a global study, and they said that 70% of marketing leaders say they rely heavily on agencies to develop strategy and execute marketing programs, despite the preference to build more skills and capabilities in-house. So you still have clients who are dependent on agencies, but at the same time, they're stealing talent from their agencies and moving them in-house. And the worst part about this is that clients are doing it because they know that their agencies won't say a word. They won't complain because it's a fear imbalance. It's a power imbalance. Clients have the control because they have the budget. Agencies beg for their attention and their lack of loyalty, and it's a vicious cycle. And it's a really toxic thing for our industry, because creative leaders end up moving people into clients' offices and not stopping them from moving, and creative people end up saying, I didn't sign up to work for this client, but I need a job. And that's where people become dissatisfied with that change. Some of the challenges we're seeing to business models of creative agencies in particular is that the way agencies are designed prevents them from delivering sustained creativity. But for anyone who's in finance on this call, you'll know the most stressful thing is pricing, value, overheads, variable costs. How people today in agencies can still pay people full-time salaries is a mystery to me, because unless you have a pipeline of clients who are paying those bills, it's kind of like a hamster in a hamster wheel. Because if clients are changing the way that they're paying agencies, how is anyone in an agency getting a full-time salary? And what we're seeing is, and Pancho, block your ears, what we're seeing is creative directors around the world being removed from the business model because they cost too much, because clients are not paying those big fees and big salaries. And the business model of an agency has always been have lots of cheap people on the bottom, have a couple of senior people, and then once those cheap people leave, recruit new ones. And the problem with this is that if you are 40 or 50 or 60 years old, agencies, I don't know if this is different for Chile, but agencies don't retain senior talent. And ageism is a big problem around the world. And that's the toxic nature of the way agencies are designed. They're not designed to retain people with high salaries and lots of knowledge. And that is a huge flaw of why I went and did my MBA, because I wasn't getting the education from an agency. That's why I no longer work in agencies. I haven't worked in them for 5 years. And because of that flaw. This cross-silo collaboration is a fundamental skill set of creative leadership. And it's actually bloody hard, because if you work in a division and you work in a big agency, or you work in a traditional business and you work in a department of innovation or product engineering or sales or marketing, whatever your specialty in your vertical, organizations are not designed for you to collaborate easily with other people across the organization. And that's where creative leadership comes in, where you can enable people on that journey. People like Magdalena and Pancho and the team who have pulled together this conference, they have those skill sets to work at the same time in a very deep vertical, but they can work across. And the ability to work like this all the time is really critical. So organizations, partnerships, relationships, the best brands understand it's about cross-pollination, like a bee, like strategic bees. And cross-silo collaboration is a fundamental skill set that you need to develop as a creative person. This impacts Chile, certainly in terms of government, which from what I understand is a huge part of the mess that Chile is in. A lot of countries, frankly, suffer this. The Trump administration, don't want to talk about politics, but please God, by the end of today, it's a different result in America. But the toxicity of short-termism impacts all of our decision-making. It's about looking at the next quarter for survival. And some of you who run your own businesses, you know that the challenge with this term is that you don't know how you're going to make it till the end of the year. How do you pay your salaries? How do you pay yourself? How do you pay your mortgage? And this is the problem. It's easy to say, let's think long-term, but the way that the marketplace and the way that business is designed, it's around short-term metrics, around quarterly earnings, quarterly results. And Unilever has taken a long-term view around profit and social purpose. Their stock price dropped when Paul Pullman brought in that whole new way of auditing the business. But then after a few years, the share price in the business started performing because they used profit and social purpose as a stimulant for growth. The problem is there's too few examples in business where we have businesses that show that profit and purpose in a sustained way is a more commercially viable path. But short-termism is very toxic. So in conclusion, these are my last couple of slides, and then I'm going to throw it to Pancho. The challenge for creative leadership, this slide is a metaphor for creative leadership. All of the turbulence and all of the chaos that we're trying to manage has to be delivered in a very cohesive, sound way. So whoever you are on this call, people are looking to us for strategic clarity, for guidance, for assurance, in some cases where we can't even provide it ourselves. Because if any of you tell me that since February, your job's in Chile, you've been an outstanding leader, everything's working perfectly, that's bullshit. Because fear and uncertainty has become a very real part of our jobs. It's very difficult to lead people and guide them when we are human, we're working from home, and our lives have become disrupted. It's okay to be vulnerable. But as creative leadership, we're expected to have certain answers. So some of the key strategic learnings that the Berlin School and I see from a global basis, because we do strategy consulting with clients, is purpose now has gone from purpose and profit from a business point of view to purpose has now become about the employee and the customer needs, the employee internally within the business and the customer. Behavioral role modeling from leadership, actually leading and defining what leadership should be. That doesn't relate to Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook or Jack Dorsey from Twitter. That's the absence of leadership with businesses that are monetizing media for profit. Processes and routines and upskilling. Right now, your people need to be distracted if you can invest in their skills by teaching them new skills in order to retain them. That's why CRECHI is such an amazing movement for 2 days, and people like me want to be a part of it to impart skill sets and learning, because like an operating system, you have to keep growing or you become stagnant and you're not relevant in the marketplace. Creative leaders have to know people are like plants. You need to keep watering them, or they will leave and seek other alternative leadership. Purpose is driving commercial performance now more than ever. And part of what I discussed with Pancho was, if you think about in Chile, a return on purpose framework could be valuable as a strategic framework to help channel all the energy around economics and culture and society and how creative thinking can solve for those challenges. Because that seems to be a collective outcome and that the people want. Side hustle culture, huge problem. If you're a leader in a business, whether you acknowledge it or not, increasingly people are working doing other side projects while you're employing them to do work for you. And the challenge is that you are subsidizing other people's work for them to make more money. That's a big problem. So side hustle culture needs to be something that's discussed openly, because if you know what your people are working on, that could actually be new business opportunities for your company. So it's all about reframing things, which is a key part of creative leadership. And then B corporations, which is a term for businesses which prioritize social purpose over growth, or marrying the two. If you're not familiar with that, look at that, because that's becoming a Western model around responsible business. So as I said, in closing, uncertainty breeds anxiety. I can't think of a shitter year in my career where everything that I've built up and a roster of clients, as Pancho was talking about, I had a roster of clients across Asia Pacific, and COVID was just this big smack in the face. But through that anxiety and through that vulnerability, me acknowledging that I'm in just as much of a confused strategic state in Sydney as some of you may be in Chile, as someone is in South Africa or New York. there's a strength that comes from that vulnerability. And part of what I think should be a fundamental in what you can help your people do is by focusing on what matters. Because if you don't, that anxiety can become toxic. It bleeds into our relationships, it bleeds into your productivity, and mental health is a huge problem globally as a consequence of COVID. So here's a few tips for you. Build a culture that aligns with people's values, the values of your people, not the values of you as a founder of your business, because that is narcissism that people are used to. If you redesign the employee experience around a collective approach, that is the way to actually succeed and retain your talent. People look to leadership to create an open system for purpose to flourish, so collaborative ways of working. Really hard to do that. We've been doing that for 8 months remotely. How do you do that with that hybrid model where some people come into your office, some people work from home? And, purpose is fragile. And it can't be, there's a phrase, lipstick on a pig, which is that it's cosmetic, which is one of the criticisms that people have had of advertising agencies that, we only do the shiny stuff. We don't actually understand how business works. We need to understand how business works because a growth mindset is foundational for creative leadership. And the last thing I'll say to you, and this is in horrific Spanish, un ejercicio de optimistas resilientes. Horrific Spanish, and I'll never speak Spanish again. For me, this has actually been a much more emotional presentation than I thought I would give, because speaking to Magdalena and Pancho, understanding the context of what's happening in your country. Context is 90% of creative leadership. Because if you understand that your job is not just getting a brief from a client and selling in a solution, your job is actually understanding the bigger commercial, cultural, social context. That's what makes our industry so phenomenal. And ironically, your community right now needs lateral thinking, needs an army of resilient optimists to work together to come up with these solutions. And believe it or not, I think Chile, from the sounds of it, the positive dissatisfaction, if you remember something that I said at the beginning of this presentation, the positive dissatisfaction to be disillusioned and upset with the status quo, but believe that there's a better way and work with different skill sets and different industries to come together around those solutions. That is how I think not only Chile can win and redesign your society by having a bottom-up approach to your transformation, but that is the way that creative leadership thrives, because people need something to believe in. And creative leadership is about defining a narrative and enabling people to contribute to that and buy into that and then go and execute on that. And that's why this presentation for me was more than an ego thing to talk to. I don't know how many random people are on this webinar today, but this is about contributing to the conversation. So I hope that something that I've presented today resonated with you. Please go look at the World Economic Forum and their Future of Jobs report and question your own skill sets and question the people in your company. Align that with the strategy of your business where you're going to seek growth. Because if COVID's taught us anything, it's to have the courage and the resilience to challenge what is important to me, what is important to my relationships. A lot of us have learned that relationships are more important than the work that we're doing. So there's a whole reprioritization of what's important. And I hope that some of this presentation has at least triggered something in you to think a little bit differently, whether that's one thing or 5. Hopefully that's a success for me if this resonated with any of you. So gracias from me. Sorry for my horrific Spanish, I apologize. But those are my contact details on the bottom. If anyone would like to work together, to challenge what I've said, if you think what I've said is bullshit, awesome, email me and tell me why. Would love to connect with as many of you. On the bottom right is Gerardo Tejo from the Berlin School. Amazing guy. If anyone would like to inquire and understand what the Executive MBA program is or the different programs the Berlin School has, please contact Gerardo. But thank you very much for listening to me for the last 35 minutes.
Thanks, Barry, for this really inspiring presentation about creative leadership. And I hope this one clarifies the aspect of the scope of what creative leadership is. Quiero dejar a todos invitados a que hagan sus preguntas en la plataforma, está el chat abajo. Si alguien quiere comentarle algo a Barry, este es el minuto. Yo tengo un par de preguntas preparadas, vamos viendo qué nos dice acá el monitor. Okay, Barry, I'm just inviting the people over here to come up with some thoughts, words, questions to challenge you the way you challenge us, the same feeling.
Please.
And by the way, Yeah, wake up, Sheila. Yeah, your Spanish, it's not terrific. Rather, my English, man. So don't worry. My English is terrific.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Okay, man. So I have something for you. What can I say? Okay, man. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Are you ready? Oh, Barry, I would like to have to talk a little about resilience. Okay, it is something that you were born with, or instead, it is something which anyone can develop throughout his or her career. And what is the relation with creative leadership? So you mentioned it, and in the top 25 skills for 2025.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So could you please go further on that point, just to clarify? It's okay. We talk about resilience a lot of time, so I think that is something that we really need to understand better, and the relation with creative leadership.
So resilience is an interesting word, because I do think resilience, and I don't know if this is the same topic in Chile, but resilience is also linked to privilege and access. The fact that I'm a white man who's worked in Sydney, San Francisco, and New York, I think, and my education and the environment that my parents inherited, I think has a correlation to my success in the industry and my ability to pursue opportunities, which is completely unfairly disproportionate to people of color and women specifically. It's a very complex issue which needs to be addressed immediately. But so the reason I'm framing that is because resilience is in the eye of the beholder. And if you think about it, resilience is actually about when shit goes wrong, what do you do? How do you make decisions to course correct and pivot? So I don't trust people who will talk to me about resilience because if they've only done things that have only ever gone well. So that's why in my experience, in my career, when I've had leaders who have never experienced failure. And that's what's interesting about the psychology of America. There's lots of things wrong with America, but what's right about America is that their capitalist, ambitious mindset is that they celebrate failure. They are a resilient culture because they understand that innovation requires failure to succeed. In a country like Australia, failure is seen as something very negative. If you have a business and it fails, investors will look at you and think, this is a liability, I'm not going to invest in this person. So resilience, to answer your question, I don't know if resilience is something you're born with or if it's something that you acquire, but when something hits you in the face and you're challenged, like COVID has done for all of us, how you pick yourself up and how you move forward and how you do that while people are reporting to you, how you have people on a payroll, that defines resilience. It's how you handle adversity and how you deal with a situation when everything goes wrong. And that's what I admire about people, how you pick yourself up. And that's why people are drawn to stories like athletes who come back, from adversity, from injuries, from cancer. People are drawn to those human stories because they prove that in spite of that setback and difficulty, you can succeed. And I think that's why people gravitate to those resilient stories.
Thanks. I will come up with a new one. It's related to the previous one. So there are three things, and I hope, as I understood, I hope that everybody understood the way I did it at the Berlin school, in terms of what really is creative leadership. So there are three forces, and they're totally different, but they're connected. One is the creative leadership itself. The second one is the thought creative leadership, and the third one is the agile creative leadership. So they are similar, but at the same time they have a huge difference between them. So if you can explain us a little more, it's going to be amazing. And prepare for the next question, Barry.
Okay, so if you think about this, out of those three, the issue I have the most problem with is thought leadership. Because any of us know that in Adweek and AdAge and any of the websites, or LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn, thought leadership for me is disingenuous, is not something that is true and credible if it's not linked to how that leader operates and performs in their organization. And sometimes thought leadership is this bullshit thing where you look at that leader and go, who is that person? Because that's not the person that I see in my agency every day. And when you think about agile leadership, that is a leader, and Pancho, you will know this, and the Edge from U2 was just talking about this in the video that you didn't see. rolling up your sleeves and working on a strategy or working on a series of photographs for a client if you're a photographer, the adversity in the creative process, and to make a tough call around yes and no and why and a recommendation. The creative process is all about conflict. So creative leadership is the ability to have a point of view, but not too much of a point of view that people don't feel like their voices are heard, but to guide a creative process that at least gets to a more productive outcome that's not driven by consensus. That's why, Pancho, you will acknowledge that creative leadership, the doing of creative leadership is so fucking hard because you're dealing with people's emotions, their anxieties, their emotional attachment to their work. It's the creative process. Creativity is very stressful. Creativity is not a good career choice if you don't welcome other people's opinions or inputs, or if you're not open to change. And the agile creative leadership that you and I learned in San Francisco at Berkeley, and the skill sets, those are skill sets to manage the creative process and manage people. Thought leadership, where you see it on LinkedIn and stuff, I think that's bullshit unless that leader is actually linked to how they lead people through the process themselves. We have too many leaders in this industry who have big fat salaries, who are asking people during COVID to take pay cuts or making people work 3 days a week or laying people off, and they themselves are getting their big fat multi-million-dollar salaries and their bonuses. That is sending the wrong signal to agencies and to people who work in them. And I think that's something in 2021 and 2022, you'll see people leave agencies because they say, this is bullshit. And sorry, but the last point I'll make on that is creative leadership. When you look at WPP in Australia and Asia Pac, WPP during COVID, they stood people down. People were on reduced salaries. And they were like, we have to do this. We have to do this for the cause. And now, recently, WPP released their statistics that their profit's gone up 40%, and they've delivered a return to shareholders. And on a human level, if I was working in a WPP agency, I would say, that is really disgusting because I've taken a financial hit for the business, for the cause, and now you've delivered a dividend to shareholders. Oh, that's the business that we work in. Thank you very much. I'm going to go on LinkedIn and look for a job. So creative leadership is understanding that the sacrifice you're asking your people to make, be truthful and transparent because it will come out in the end, especially with these big holding companies that a lot of people are leaving because of things that I just touched on.
Thanks. Actually, the only way that I tested my agile creative leadership was it's being now during the pandemic, never before, and now it's really under tested. The chat is overwhelming. A lot of things that I want to come out. For instance, Barry, what's going to be your recommendation to keep your teams motivated and also aligned with the business proposal when there's a lot of layoffs even inside the agency? So how you can keep them alive, believing in the place where they're working, even if there's not the physical space anymore, and they're probably working at home or they're whatever.
So I've just done a series of projects. In fact, I've been working with a government in Australia for the last 6 months leading their COVID strategy. And one of the things that I saw, which is I think consistent with the other businesses I work with, is that the first thing we did as managers, and Pancho, I love you because your humility, but like survival skill sets on how to save someone's life or how to, emergency first aid, you only use it when you cut yourself while hiking up a mountain. And that's what COVID is. And during COVID, managers and leaders, what we did was we thought, okay, how do I respond to this? Okay, so everyone's working from home. So we're going to have a morning phone call, then we'll have a check-in phone call in the afternoon, and we'll divide tasks and responsibilities. And that was a natural instinct because people were saying as a leader, how do I keep the process going? How do I get the brief into the system? How do we review things? So from a performance and task management point of view, intuitively leaders have jumped to that because they had to keep the engine moving. The challenge has been on a human level, especially with single people, the social isolation that comes from not working in the office. And whether you're 35 and single or married with kids, everyone needs that social connection and that sense of belonging because that's actually the culture. When you think about it, I did a job with government for 6 months from my dining room table. I didn't even meet these people for 6 months, and I worked with over 100 people. That's not normal. That should not be normal from a cultural point of view. So the challenge that we have as a manager is, if you can safely, like in Australia now, we've got the pandemic under control. So now there's the ability to have a hybrid way of working where, and hopefully you can soon in Chile, where you can have some sense of work remotely for 80% of the time, but once a week, have something which brings your team together in person or online to encourage discussions other than work. Because the problem is there's such an imbalance that people are being very good leaders by assigning people tasks and responsibilities to do, but people go like little mice with a piece of cheese. You'll have a call, you'll go and do your work, and then you'll come back. And people lose that sense of connection, like, why am I working for this agency? Why am I doing this again? And as a leader, you've got to keep reminding them, guys, we're doing this because we're all in this together, and we happen to be in the business of an agency or a client side or a design shop or a photography agency. You have to keep reminding people, and by listening to people. And that's the challenge, is that, and sorry, I'll stop talking now, Pancho, but by assigning tasks and responsibilities, that's a checklist. People need more than a checklist to feel valued and understood. And the challenge is, in a room, I'm not looking at any of your eyes right now. So intuitively, I'm hoping that what I'm saying is resonating, but I can't see that feedback. If you have video calls and people mute their screens, you can't see people's reactions. That is allowing people to go and remove themselves and be in that isolated space. So as a leader, you've got to encourage everyone's equal. Let's all look at each other. Let's all talk to each other and have more human conversations balanced with professional ones. That's the only way to navigate this remote working, because otherwise people, what's the difference if they're working for you or if they're working for another one of 15 businesses in Chile? You have to protect that. You know, you've worked so hard to build that culture. That culture like purpose can just be poof in thin air if leaders don't make sure that people remind them, why are you doing this together? What are you experiencing at home? Some people have divorces and health issues. Like, these are very scary times right now. I'm not saying your team has to have a call about someone's depression and their issue as a team conversation, but the emotional intelligence is where you need to think laterally like a creative leader.
Yeah, culture is really connected with the purpose. That I'm really aligned with that.
Yeah.
A fellow friend of our community called MOWSZOWSKI, he's the CEO of La Familia and a creative agency here in Chile. He wondered in a time of uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty, what is the right way to lead your team, because this era of uncertainty it will remain a lot of time. So what's the main challenge of being a leader in order to lead your team when the uncertainty is gonna remain for a lot of time? It's not gonna pass in the next year. Yeah, we all know that.
You know, the funny thing about, it's not funny, but the funny thing about COVID is that it's forced the business in our industry. Our industry was always selling commoditized things, right? If you look at media agencies, media, buying and selling media, blah, 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 it's all commoditized. And the differentiation between the businesses in our industry up until COVID has been something where it's been a challenge. Now, because of COVID, to answer your question, that's where the value creation comes from. What business are we in? How do we grow in that space? Can we grow in that space? And how do we work with our client partners to deliver that growth? And what this is exposing is the lack of honest strategic relationships between agencies and clients. So very, very few agencies, Wyden and Kennedy, never pushes back on Nike for Nike being an evil company for treating female athletes differently to Serena Williams when they get pregnant. All the misogyny and the bullshit that Nike does internally, and they come out with a Colin Kaepernick ad that will win a Cannes. So there's a disconnect between how the business of Nike operates with their advertising. Now, the challenge in these times is, as an agency, because I mentioned the power dynamic, you can't go in there and say to Nike, you're behaving disgustingly, doing this, and that, and let's do this. Because you don't have the political capital, because we really need them. So pick your battle with a client. If you understand where growth will come from, lead a client to that space. Lead them to where growth is going to come from, because clients are having the same problems that agencies are having. You know, if clients traditionally can't deliver a product in category X, they're using their skill sets to move into category Y. there is a lot of growth that comes from helping clients think laterally about where growth will come from. And a lot of the scary part is that that's where it comes to skills. Your people may not have the skills you need in order to deliver that growth. So that's why the Future of Jobs report, you should look at that and say, do the people we have align with how we're going to grow? And does the skill sets we have align with what's going to deliver that growth? But I'm sorry I went on that tangent about challenging clients. But if you're not honest enough to challenge your clients that your product is actually shit, that's why your strategy that you buy from us is not working, then that's never going to be an honest relationship. There's always going to be a power imbalance. But I hope that answers your question around defining what growth is and going after that growth. And one of the key examples is an airline. If you're an agency working with an airline, any airline around the world is going to be grounded for the most part because of COVID, most airlines. But if you're an agency, you don't say to the airline, look at all your other assets, which before COVID were all extensions of the business, health insurance and small business insurance and blah, blah, blah. Look at those and say, how do we elevate those as growth drivers of the business? So a lot of it comes down to taking a business mindset of understanding your client's business has never been more important than it is now. Instead of just taking another brief from a client, here's your marketing brief. We want to launch this new product in Q1 of 2021. But the game is much bigger than that if you're going to survive from a business point of view.
Yeah, you remind me that campaign for Thailand Airlines. You remember that they rewarded the people who stay at home, just staying at home, giving miles. So what's an amazing case. The last question.
So Pancho, you just touched on something. You just touched on something really important, that business understood that the business they were in, which was delivering a service for loyalty, once that stopped, they had to then pivot and change the role that they played in people's lives. Creative leadership is not rocket science. It's just taking your head out of your own ass to realize, how do we pivot and create value and be relevant in people's lives? It's not more complicated than that. But strategically, there was a rationale that probably underpinned that recommendation, because the Thai government probably wasn't advocating those behaviors. So the airline filled that void of leadership.
Yeah, I agree. It's not rocket science, but to me, it's more. It's more willing science. So yeah. The last question, we would like to keep talking with you. I'm really enjoying it, especially Berlin is here tonight. But the thing is that during COVID, we lose the contact with clients. Sure, we are seeing each other through a screen, through platforms such as this tonight. But even though it's been a while since having a real conversation and personal conversation with clients and on round tables or walking away with a client to talk about any challenge or any brief. So, any last advice about something that we can trigger to improve this relation between clients, creative teams, the agency teams as well. So, any final advice, Barry, please?
Unfortunately, technology has been very efficient during this period, but it's actually been a huge blocker for relationship, for momentum, and for energy between the client. So, some of the more lateral things that I would do, I don't know the degree of, I think you're in stage 3 or 4 lockdown. If you can, I would create a working lunch situation with a client. If you have Uber Eats, for example, in Santiago, send a meal to the client and have a virtual working lunch with the client. Do what you can to creatively, artificially create a sense of intimacy, because clients remember that. And this exposes the lack of understanding we have of the clients we work with. Because if you have a relationship with your clients, where the only time you engage with them is when they give you a brief and then you go away for 2 weeks and come up with concepts and come back, there's always a judging relationship. So it's actually very weird. And people like Pancho understand that the relationship with the client is the glue to the whole business relationship. So the time you invest in just talking to that client, and it's very hard to do that on a screen or on the phone, but we have to invest more time in talking to clients as people. And if you connect with people as people, that will then flourish from a work point of view, because it changes the power dynamic. Because that CMO is just as worried about keeping their job and motivating their people, which, by the way, parallels with people like Pancho's worry about motivating their people and driving the best outcomes. So hopefully from this conversation, you'll realize that the challenges that you're trying to face in your business, your clients are trying to solve for the same things. So if you share knowledge, for example, share with the clients, actually, let's run a workshop on creative leadership because it will benefit both of our people, because we think this is a skill set that the World Economic Forum has identified, growth hacking. How do we work better with your client side marketing team and our agency team to hack growth for Q1 of 2021? Focus proactively your client's attention on what they should be thinking about. Those are the types of proactive ways you can help clients build trust in you, improve their people because you're improving your people, and using your energy more wisely. I think the transference and being more generous and having a collective mindset is how I think we'll navigate through this pretty shitty period, if we're being honest with ourselves.
Okay, Barry, I just want to say a parting words in Spanish, and then I will come back to you to say goodbye, my dear friend. Le quiero agradecer a Barry su excelente presentación. Espero que le sirva a todos. En lo personal, haber hecho el MBA de liderazgo creativo en la Berlin School fue algo que realmente transformó mi carrera profesional. Aprendí mucho y muchas de las cosas que Barry está mencionando el día de hoy creo que las podemos aplicar en los negocios, en la creatividad, en la forma de ver el mundo, en la forma que este CRECHI está enfrentando la inspiración para dar soluciones sociales a todos los problemas que se nos vienen en un Chile distinto, en un Chile que va a escuchar a todos. Y nada, los quiero dejar a todos muy cordialmente invitados a mañana, al segundo día de CRECHI, mañana desde temprano a partir de las 9. Conéctense, más charlas, más speakers, más keynote, más workshop. Está realmente buenísimo este CRECHI online por primera vez. Dear Barry, what can I say, my friend? Hope to see you personally soon. Hopefully here in Chile to share our delicious red wines. Hope to see you wherever. I don't know. Oh man, somebody's calling me. Sorry. That kind of things happen when you're alive. No, hope to see you soon, Barry, somewhere in the world, even Australia or Kansas this year for the Leaders Program or whatever. So we really appreciate on behalf of ACHAP, this is really matter for us. So we really appreciate your contribution to this moment in Chile.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry to all of you if I spoke too fast. My mother always told me growing up that I need to slow down and speak slower. And the key thing in this presentation is that this is just what I'm contributing to the conversation. So please communicate with me, challenge my thinking, tell me if you agree. And the whole point of this is starting a commercial creativity conversation on a global basis. And everyone at CRECHI should be very proud of how hard it is to do what you guys have done to create something which feeds people and inspires people. So well done to you. And thank you to everyone who gave up 6 to 7 o'clock at night to listen to me. So much appreciated.
We are on time. Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mañana, CRECHI 2020. #CRECHI. Chao. Bye.